Welcome all to Episode 2 of the Change Society podcast, brought to you by S&S. My name is Matt Bradley and I am the practice lead for Agile at Sullivan & Stanley. For those that don't know us, S&S is a crowd-based company made up of top 5% recruiters, interims, technology leaders and change agents who are formed to disrupt hired recruitment and consultancy models that are pervasive in industry. Today we're joined by agility thought leaders John Coleman and Nader Talai from Value Glide. As part of the Change Society, S&S are always interested in new ways to deliver sustainable change in an emergent world, and we hope you enjoy hearing about their new meta framework, I Am the Change. Well, thanks for coming, John and Nader, on this crisp February morning. I thought it'd be good to start with some general introductions. So John, Nader, could you start with giving us a quick insight into your history and your journey to Agility Transformation Partners? Nader?
Sure. So my agility journey started in 2002 when one of the companies that was delivering a project for us was using a thing called Extreme Programming, or XP, which I had no idea what it was. So got a book, read a bit about it, got excited about it, but that particular delivery went wrong. So I thought the problem was XP, and then that's where my journey started. So I went from XP to Scrum to Kanban to theory of constraints and all sorts of things. So that's how I started. That's it really, John.
I started with Scrum in 2004 and used it really for rescuing really bad situations, and did that for a number of years. And then I discovered Kanban in 2011. Started moving more into that, also theory of constraints, looked at some of the synchronization patterns in the market as well, and some of the other agile options like crystal clear.
So I know you gentlemen obviously met on a transformation. And I think, John, you mentioned to me previously, yourself and Nader were coming at transformations from a bit of a different angle to start with. Could you explain that in a bit more detail? And now how has the marriage worked?
Cool. So I guess the best way of describing it is I had an experimentation approach from about 2012 onwards, and so I was combining some change thought leadership and agility thought leadership. So there was a bit of change leadership from Cotter, getting great momentum, and then some change evolution, evolving and Kanbaning your way through, or whatever method you're using to get into some rhythm. But the fundamental concept was there was going to be some kind of experiment. So experiments would be running one after the other. And I was on the speaking circle for a while, talking like that. And when I met Nader, Nader pointed out to me that actually sometimes we can't do an experiment, because if you think about it, with an experiment, you have some hypothesis and you think something's going to happen, and actually sometimes we don't know what's going to happen. So the terminology that Nader was using was let's probe, let's not do an experiment. So I found that very interesting. Don't deny that experimentation is still useful in certain contexts, but I was introduced to that. And the other thing that Nader introduced me to was Toyota Improvement Kata and Coaching Kata, which is kind of part of the secret sauce really. It's one of the ingredients that we have in helping people.
So it sounds like Nader reined you in a little bit.
I think so, yeah.
And Nader, from what's your take on it? Did you garner anything from John when you met?
Yeah, there's loads of stuff I learned from John. I mean, it's extreme programming, extreme ownership, viral change, and a lot of. So John has got a very deep and wide knowledge on all the different change and synchronization patterns, if you like. So I learned a lot from John, from that, and I think the two of us, the way that I see it working is that what we're doing is not necessarily adding more and more stuff, but trying to get more of a laser focus on, what is fit for purpose for the context that we are dealing with, what are the things that we need to select, and how do we make it more effective for the organizations that we happen to be engaged on. And I think that's where the two of us complement each other.
Good. So it seems like not quite opposites attract, but the marriage is harmonised anyway, so that's good. So you both worked on various business agility transformations. Looking back over your history, what do you see as the key traits and successes and probably more importantly failures you see in agility transformation? Nader?
Sure. So I started my agility journey through the development cycle. So, a lot of my early engagements were about making development more effective. And then I realized, that's still an issue. I'm not for a minute saying that that's not an issue. But the bigger problem is actually before we even get to the development. And that's where most of my focus is now, is trying to understand from a business agility what it is you want to do, why you want to do it, how you're going to measure it, and how are you, the person who's, if you like, the change agent in the organization, how are you coaching your team so that they can sort of understand the message, own the message, communicate the message, and know what the measures are that they can grow. So that's
one of the biggest learnings that I had was that's actually towards the end of 2014. Interesting, before I met Nader, and at the time, I would have been like a lot of my peers, I think, in that I would have said, this is probably what you need to do. Analyze the situation. This is probably where you need to go, and I was even thinking to myself, why do you not get what I'm saying to you? It's just so obvious there's a problem here. And people accepting waters from fall and things like that. And so the trick that I was missing at the time was not ratcheting down my language to resonate with the people involved. I did all the other tricks, like, for example, being in the trenches with them, delivering even just the wrong thing with them, but the trick I was missing was the psychology piece. Spiral Dynamics Integral was one of the huge additions to our approach in the last couple of years, because what we do now is when we're dealing with change sponsors or any significant stakeholder, we're trying to figure out the meme code of the person that we're dealing with, so that we can use the appropriate language so that we resonate with the person and connect with the person. The other thing that we noticed, because Nader and I both work in organizations where agility transformations are the most difficult, that's actually what gives us a buzz. We wouldn't really be guys for Silicon Valley or anything like that, because they've got it already sussed, right?
Yeah.
But we borrowed a few approaches from extreme ownership, and I found it very interesting that, for example, when I work in regulated companies, like even Shell, the oil company, some banks that I worked with since, they're very, very regulated, and they need to comply with the law. And yes, they would like to be more flexible, but is there another way that we can achieve agility within those constraints? And so I found it interesting that the Navy SEALs, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, they wrote Extreme Ownership. And so they had some very simple concepts, like, for example, believing the why, which kind of ties in with Simon Sinek as well, doesn't it? Start with the why. But also lead up and down the chain of command. Lead subordinates and superiors alike. A lot of the time we're looking up, asking, why are we doing this? And they're people, they're human, and maybe they have a better idea, but maybe they're still people, right? And so it's more important that we almost give an indication of what we intend to do. This is in turning the ship around as well. I intend to, and this is why I intend to do it, and the leader will confirm or deny that you can go ahead with that. So bringing some military metaphors into regulated companies where they need agility is that's something we've been looking into as well.
So I know, just going back to that point on language you said there, and using language that resonates, as we move into 2017, do you think the word transformation has been overused? Do you think it's tarnished somewhat?
I do think it's tarnished, and another thing that's tarnished is scaling. That we need to make something huge. And I do like what Tobias Mayer is saying. He talks about growing agility, and I would go further, I would say growing good agility. And I think that needs to be the goal, actually. Transforming, well, we'll discover when we talk to the people what they're really able to do. It might be a revolution, it might be an incremental change. We'll discover when we talk to the people what they're ready for.
Nader, any comments?
I think when most organizations, when they say transformation or agility, what they really mean is that I want it done cheaper. And one of the things we have to sort of, if you like, educate them on is that if you focus on cost, your cost will actually go up. But what you want to do is to do it better, do it faster, and then cheaper would be a side effect of doing it better and faster. Therefore, you can now do it cheaper. And that's what most people really mean when they say I want to do a lean and agile transformation. And it's just getting the other way around to say it's not cheaper first, do it better, then do it faster, then you get cheaper.
Cool.
But I do agree that the word is overused. Both lean, agile, and transformation is just...
Well, it's a crowded market, so...
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because Leandro Herrero talked recently on a blog about changeability.
Yeah.
So now Nader and I have been talking about transformability, which ties in with the approach that we're using. So if, for example, we get asked to help with a transformation, because that's what the organisation is calling it, we would like it to be the last transformation attempt. So that means achieving good outcomes, but also making the change itself part of the work, so that continuous improvement is just normal. And getting people into a rhythm of doing that. Toyota Kata is quite useful. You can use all sorts of techniques. But transformability is what we're about. It's being partners with the organisations to help them to grow good agility and to just improve from there and keep it going.
Cool. So you're both working for Value Glide now, which is I know a company that's Nader, you've been working with for a while and started. So could you just give us a quick background on that and perhaps even more about how it's evolved with agility over the last 6 years?
Sure. I mean, Value Glide is a company that I formed mainly because I don't want it to be just a one-person company. It's about collaboration and building associations. The biggest problem for most organizations is getting the right team in place to help them with a transformation. Any organization of any size needs more than one person to help them with a transformation. And that's where, I guess, Value Glide comes in.
So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're codifying what we've come up with over the last few years. Nader and I don't want to be consultants forever. I mean, we're happy to help people, but we're just two people and we can only help so many companies. And we think we've come up with the answer. We can't be sure because you need 7 years of a change to see whether the thing really stuck. But we're seeing signs that when we go into organizations and when we leave, there tends to be a legacy of good things even after we leave. And we recognize as well that consultants can be short term and the organization needs to build its own internal capabilities. So that's absolutely fine. What we're trying to do now, our next step in the journey, is to build a community of chefs worldwide who can apply the same techniques. So we've developed I Am the Change, which is about agility, transformability, and we're trying to create chefs. We don't have recipes, we don't have a cookie cutter saying this is going to fix it, here's a magic wand, off you go. What we are doing is we're developing knowledge and skills with people who want to come with us on the journey and who want to be able to deliver a really good transformability. So to that end, we're writing some content at the moment. We're collaborating with change thought leaders and agility thought leaders on what we're doing. We're supporting that with a worldwide survey on practices. We're trying to get a correlation between success and failure, of course, and certain practices. What we want to see is, even though Nader and I have loads of case studies of success, we're trying to discover if almost by accident people elsewhere in the world using the same patterns in certain contexts have also had successful outcomes. We're also aware, of course, that it's what we do is very context dependent. So the chefs that we'll be helping to develop, they become certified in I Am the Change, basically, and different levels of certification, and with support from Nader and myself. And the idea is that we build a community of people who can actually spread good agility. There are a number of competing frameworks in the market. What's different about us is we're offering a meta framework. It's a framework of frameworks, so we recognize all the really good thinking that's been going on, some really fantastic thought leadership, which we're not going to dilute from any of the contributing pieces. But we are developing ways that they can be all integrated. So we call it an integrative, context-dependent approach. The absolute opposite of a cookie cutter.
So Nader, could you give us a little bit more detail about I Am the Change and maybe its key concepts in a bit more detail?
Sure. So I Am the Change. I mean, first of all, I think why did we come up with that? A couple of reasons. Why, understanding the why. Why are you doing the change? And the other reason is a lot of the time, the more senior you are in an organization, the more you expect the change to be happening outside your office. And one of the key things with I Am the Change is we want to tackle that. That's that actually you are the role model. Within the organization, we copy the behaviors of people that we respect and have influence. And if you don't behave in the way that you want the change to happen, then it's less likely for it to succeed. So I've already given you a couple of them. So why you're doing the change, what are the behaviors that you want to, if you like, promote within your organization, and how you as a role model, you're going to behave in those. Then it's about the measures. You need to have the measures. How are you going to measure the success of this transformation or this change that you're doing? And you need to have both leading and lagging measures, and that they will relate to the context that you are talking about. So those are the three key things. There are lots of other ingredients with I Am the Change, and we'll drill into it a bit more. But if we don't have those three right, we don't know why we're doing it, we don't know what the behaviors are, and we don't know how we're going to measure it, we are more likely to drift and not have focus. So those three will give us the focus. I mean, the other reason that we came up with the approach is we see a lot of the change agents coming in there and wanting to do big change, or we are obsessed on the obstacles. We cannot change because of these things are wrong. We need to fix all of these things, or these obstacles need to go away before we move forward, and that doesn't help us. The other thing that we also do is we've noticed is that there's a lot of time. We need to understand how we got here, but there is a balance between spending loads of time to go back in history and actually saying, okay, I know enough to be able to move forward, and getting those things right. So the other ingredients, so I'm sort of digressing a little bit. Let's go back to the ingredients of it. So I've given you those things. So the other sort of ingredients of it, and I'll let John come in and complete everything else that I've missed. But it's about building a network of influences, and that doesn't necessarily mean on the hierarchy. It means, the people in every organization, there are people who have influence, working with them and having them as your change agents to help you, if you like, get to that change. That is something that comes out of viral change. And John, do you want to add more?
Yeah, so lots of ingredients. It really depends on the context.
Yeah.
It's actually very interesting that in a bank that I was in for about 18 months, there were two different business units, if you like, within that part of the bank, and in the same building. And we used I Am the approach in one of the areas, and they picked certain methods, and they picked a certain way to synchronize their work and all that good stuff. But when I went into another business unit, the answer was quite different. So even I used the same approach. Why are we doing this? They had a different why as well, by the way, which is interesting. And in that particular case, we used checklists. Interestingly, you wouldn't normally use checklists, but on the airline industry, I'm a big fan of aircraft investigation, and lots of crashes because people didn't complete a checklist, right? And even though we're very experienced at doing agility, a lot of us we can forget things. We can be we can rush things, and when we rush things, we forget things. It even happens to me when I travel, for example. I forget things. So it really depends on the context. It's a really, really large framework. What we're doing is we're giving recognition to all of the constituent frameworks. So whether that's viral change or extreme ownership or static, even from Mike Burrows, or whatever technique we're using to help progress things. But the key that we offer really is, how do you integrate those? A lot of the individual thought leaders would be thinking, or would be saying, that you can only use my approach and use it this way, and that's the only way you can use it. The difference that we're bringing to the table is actually we've figured out a way to get them to work very well together without necessarily diluting the constituent frameworks. So I think that's the key.
Cool. So obviously it's quite a flexible meta framework then. So the results for companies, I mean, is there a target market for you at the moment, type of companies that would benefit from this type of framework?
Our sweet spot would be organisations that find this the most difficult. Now that said, we do have deal breakers. So if, for example, the organisation has decided that it is very happy with Water Scrum Fall, the combination of Waterfall and Scrum, that's something we tend to walk away from. Unless they have said, okay, John and Nader, we do want to get away from this, but help us to get off this drug. And so we'll give them some methadone or whatever to get off that, whether that's Kanban or whatever way we get them off that drug. So we're quite clear about that. We're also quite clear about the need for DevOps, that if you don't do it at the very start, at least within a few months, you're going to be serious about doing this, because it's just not going to happen otherwise. But deal breakers aside, we do have other deal breakers. We are quite flexible. We tend to work with the larger organizations, the organizations that find it the most difficult. But interestingly, I've also used it with some startups. And interestingly, some of the startups I dealt with were more difficult than the larger organizations. It'd be quite interesting that way.
Anything to comment on that, Nader?
No, the only thing I comment on is that we say we are business agility specialists, and business agility is only it's about time to market, is about sort of getting return on investment, is getting more customers, and unless we deliver to the market, then everything else is inside the house, which is really not business agility. It's agility, but we haven't achieved business agility.
Great. And I think something else the C-suite are obviously eager to know is how do you sustain the results of the change. So is that something that obviously is contained within this new framework as well?
Absolutely. So one of the key things, one of the first things that I would do, and Nader does as well, is I look for a set of key influencers, but also a set of people who are likely to carry the baton when we leave the building. And so developing internal coaches, internal transferability partners, developing their skills, helping them to get certified on some of the things that they need to get certified on. Helping them, let them shadow us and so on, and effectively having proteges, to follow behind us, and that's key. I mean, we recognise, Nader and I, that the lifespan of our engagement in a company is likely to be, it could be up to 18 months and longer, but it's usually less than 12 months. The appetite for high cost consultants coming in helping it can be short. What we would hate to happen is as soon as some cost cutting was needed, that the transformation lost energy. So one of the first things we do is we just make sure that we get that momentum going with the internal people.
Yeah, I think what I add to that is that we basically use the scout and champions model. So the scout teams, and we build the champions so that they can sustain it within the organization, and we spend a lot of time to make sure that champions are self-sufficient.
So what's next for I in the change? Where are you up to in the journey? And
it's a really exciting time. So we're putting together a manifesto for agility transformability. We have a set of practices, that's great, but what are those practices hanging off? What kind of agendas, values, principles? A survey on the practices, hoping to get a really good response to that, so I'm hoping that will go viral. We're writing a book at the moment, and we're developing content upon which certifications will be based. So 2017 is our year. There's a lot happening in 2017.
Sounds like you're going to be busy.
Absolutely.
Well, finally, anyway, it's been great to hear about I Am the Change, but I think listeners would be keen to get your thoughts on the future of agility with two thought leaders in the house. So I know we've been talking about Scrum 6-7 years ago and moved to extreme ownership and spiral dynamics in 2016. What do you see as the future, Nader?
Well, scaling is fashionable at the moment, so everybody wants to scale because it's fashion. I think we will have some successes with that, but that will pass, and then we will probably end up getting back to, at the end of the day, is about having teams that can work together and deliver, and it's about network of teams, and that will come. And as John said earlier, it's about, okay, how do you synchronize the work across the teams, and that's where it will come. And we'll go less for scaling and recipes of scale at large organizations, more about how do we grow it.
And to add to that, I would say that DevOps is going to be key. DevOps, continuous delivery. A lot of the meetups now, a lot of the topics are about going beyond Agile, if you like, and going to the next stage. And lean finance as well, I think. That would be one of the constituents of our approach as well. How do we finance our work? If we can change the way we finance our work, if we can get organizations to transition their mindset and their organization design to support agility top to bottom, left to right, including vendors, key suppliers, I think that's the future. I am noticing, which I didn't notice before, I am noticing the last couple of years that vendors are taking the growing agility agenda much more seriously. They recognise that they need to get on board.
So I know you're writing a new manifesto. Do you feel that the Agile manifesto is out of date in 2017?
I do lots of training as well, and I find myself translating it. When I see the word software, I substitute the word product, rightly or wrongly. It's just because agility is not just about software anymore, it's about pretty much anything. I think it's still relevant. I'm aware of other manifestos about modern Agile and all that kind of good stuff, and they're all interesting and happy with that. I think what's missing is how do we combine the best thinking from agility and the best thinking from change and get them to work together, because in this world of transformability where we need organizations to respond more quickly to what's going on in the market, it's not just about agility, it's about being able to change. And so that's what we're trying to introduce with this new manifesto and we're collaborating with thought leaders on that. And the reason we're doing it is because we want to ensure that there's a broad brush support for the values and principles from the very best thought leaders.
Anything to add, Nader?
No, I think John has covered it all.
I think it's a nice way to end, John. So, well, thanks for coming in, John. Nader, it's great to hear about Value Glide and I Am the Change, and we all look forward to seeing its progress in 2017.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.